Simplifying verse 138 of Surah Al-Imran. This is a clear statement to mankind, a guidance and an admonition to the righteous. Summary of the interpretation of Surah Al-Imran, verse 138. The verse begins by stating that God clarifies that all that has preceded is a clear statement to mankind and that when a statement is issued, its strength, power, and greatness derive from the power of the one who issues it. So what about a statement coming from God? It is a clarification from God that He did not take you by surprise, but rather taught you what guides you to the path of God and informed you of what happened to previous nations. You have learned from what happened to you, so take a lesson from it. This is a lesson for the righteous who obey God and learn lessons from all events. The lessons learned from the believers' lack of victory in the Battle of Uhud teach us how God nurtured the believers after Uhud so that defeat would be transformed into a building of faith and morality. And it begins with the verse 122 speaks of the period following the defeat at the Battle of Uhud. This defeat was not due to any ingratitude on the part of the believers, but rather to their human nature, which is prone to error and temptation, weakness, and despair. Because they were believers, this weakness and despair could be overcome by turning to God immediately and because God Almighty is merciful, He gave them lessons so that they would not repeat the mistakes that led to their defeat. These lessons were a mercy to the believers, for defeat could cause them frustration. Therefore, God wanted to strengthen their resolve and make their hearts firm. 1. To place their trust in Him and to know that He is their protector. 2. To remind them of His victory for them at Badr, despite their small numbers. 3. Then He demonstrated His mercy by sending angels as reinforcements, making this a glad tiding for the believers. 4. To clarify that victory comes from God, and in this lies true security. 5. Then He reassured them about what would happen to the enemy. God would destroy their foundations and render their plans futile. 6. This further reassures the believer that all matters belong to God, the owner of the universe. After these lessons, which mend the believer's broken heart and reassure him that God is with him, we find that God, in His mercy, gives believers lessons of another kind. We learn from them that one of the ills addressed by the verses after the Battle of Uhud was greed. The taking of spoils was a result of the temptation of greed. Therefore, the verses about usury came to warn the believer against avarice and exploiting people's needs, because greed and usury share the characteristics of usury in depriving people of their rights and an excessive attachment to worldly things. God's bestowal upon the believers continues through His educational approach, nurturing their souls with the ethics of Islam by following God's path and obeying His commands and the commands of His messenger. This obedience is manifested in hastening to do good, in giving in times of ease and hardship and in all circumstances, in suppressing anger and not being quick to anger, in forgiveness that elevates the believer to the level of excellence, and in refraining from committing immoral acts. All of this is a protection from God's wrath and punishment, and it is piety through which the believer attains more of God's mercy, love and forgiveness.